Welcome back to the third episode of my Awkward Routes series, folks. We start today's episode in Swiss Cottage, as we will be reviewing another awkward route. What's this route, you might ask? Well, it's none other than the 603, the 4-journey-a-day bus route that operates between Swiss Cottage and Muswell Hill. The service is operated by Metroline out of their Holloway garage. It takes a rather direct route between the two places, starting off on the Swiss Cottage gyratory before heading up through Hampstead, Whitestone Pond, Highgate Village, and East Finchley to reach Muswell Hill. It's only a 6-mile trek from Swiss Cottage up to Muswell Hill, so not the longest of routes really, taking only 40 minutes from end to end. In this video, like with the previous two awkward bus routes, I'll be making sure to mention the rather limited history of the service, discuss the areas that the service passes through, and give my opinion on how I believe the 603 could be improved in the future. If you like this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video, and without further ado, well, come join me as I ride the day route that was never meant to be. As the first of the three digits suggest, the 603 has traditionally been a school service, designed for posho private school pupils to be ferried into Highgate, Hampstead, and Muswell Hill every morning. The 603 only has 4 journeys a day in both directions, rather unusual for a school service. Across the UK, a school bus will have a journey to a school in the morning and a journey leaving the school in the afternoon. There are some exceptions to this rule, however, such as in Truro in southwest England, where students will travel from afar to reach their lessons, but due to the sheer volume of students attending the college, journeys to and from the school are also timetabled during the middle of the day. The 603 is a bit of an oddity, at least in London, where it has bi-directional journeys during both the morning and afternoon, not something you really see when it comes to school services, although I do think there are a few other examples in London. What does make the 603 strange compared to the stereotypical school routes elsewhere in London is that the journeys aren't catered towards a specific school, and instead cater to a variety, presumably why there are bi-directional journeys in both the morning and afternoon. The 603 for the best part of 20 years has been fulfilling this slightly strange role. The route was introduced on the 10th of January 2004 between Swiss Cottage and Muswell Hill to use Fitzjohn's Avenue, Heath Street, Spaniards Lane, Hampstead Lane, North Hill, Great North Road, East Finchley High Road and Fortis Green to make the 6-mile journey. However, at one stage it was meant to look very different. So why was it meant to look different? And why didn't its original routing ever take shape? To answer this, we'll have to look at the specific reason why the 603 was introduced. The 603 was introduced back in January of 2004 to combat school run congestion that commonly occurred in the Muswell Hill, Highgate and Hampstead areas. Being well-off affluent areas, these areas see large volumes of school children attending private or independent schools, as well as these areas being home to many private schools themselves. Due to the concentration of private schools, the number of parents driving within the area is enormous, as well as it not helping that the average car journey length had increased by that point from 1.2 miles in 1997. The congestion created by the school run prompted TfL to review the plausibility of a school service. They were able to identify passenger flows during the school run from Muswell Hill towards Highgate Village in Hampstead, and so chose to introduce the 603 on a 6-month trial basis, though it clearly proved to be a success. The idea was for the service to run along the Broadway, but instead of using Fortis Green, Great North Road and North Hill, for it to instead follow the 43 and 134 towards Highgate Station, using Muswell Hill Road for it to then cross Archway Road onto Southwood Lane, following that past Highgate School to approach the Hampstead Lane junction from the other side, leaving Highgate Hill. Southwood Lane residents kicked up a fuss over this, however, and the routing was amended to run through East Finchley instead. They weren't wrong to kick up a fuss in my opinion. Whilst the Archway Road end of Southwood Lane is wider and more appropriate when it comes to the operation of a bus, as you progress towards Highgate School the road really starts to narrow, and you find that a double-decker wouldn't have been so appropriate. Not to mention, when you factor in park and stride journeys, where cars are parked further away and a 5 to 10 minute walk is undertaken to reach the Highgate schools, as well as parents choosing to walk their children to school, when you consider how narrow the pavement already gets, it would be absolute chaos when you factor in a double-decker travelling at these times. The 43 and 134 when the 603 was introduced in 2004 were a lot more frequent than they are nowadays due to the introduction of the congestion charge in February of the year prior, leading to a ramping up in frequency of bus routes into central London, which the 43 and 134 both are. So reaching the 603 wasn't a challenge for those living off Muswell Hill Road. There was a strong campaign by local MPs for the service introduction, which included former Liberal Democrat MP for Hornsey and Wood Green, Lytham Featherstone, and the service has remained very political, although the reason for that will become apparent later on in the video. Now, let's move on to discussing the areas that the 603 passes through then, shall we? We start here in Swiss Cottage, an area identified by the London Plan as a district centre within London. The name Swiss Cottage originates from ye olde Swiss Cottage pub. This is sandwiched between the Odeon Cinema and Swiss Cottage station. The pub was built as a Swiss chalet back in 1840, as a coaching inn when the surrounding areas hadn't yet seen any development. When the Finchley Road and Avenue Road were constructed in 1926, they were built to skirt around the pub, presumably why you've got that hideous looking gyratory that you're greeted with as soon as you leave the station. The area as we know it didn't see much in the way of development until the 1930s though, when the Regency flats were constructed and filled out the island on the gyratory. These flats are strangely Grade 2 listed, but the surrounding pub isn't. How peculiar. For those wanting to interchange within Swiss Cottage, you've got a variety of train stations within walking distance to choose from. Swiss Cottage is the most obvious one, where you can change for the Jubilee line towards Wembley, Central London, Stratford, and North West London suburbs such as Kingsbury and Stanmore. The current Jubilee line station was constructed back in 1939 on a new section of deep-level tunnel when the Metropolitan line's at the time Stanmore services transferred to the Bakerloo line. The station initially opened as a combined station with the Metropolitan line, where the Metropolitan used subsurface platforms 1 and 2 whilst the Bakerloo line used deep-level platforms 3 and 4. The combined station didn't last for long, however, given the Metropolitan line station shut in August of 1940. Further up the road from Swiss Cottage you've got Finchley Road and Frognall and Finchley Road respectively, the latter being a Metropolitan line station and Jubilee line station, and the former being a London Overground station, which provides links towards Richmond, Clapham Junction, both Westfields at Stratford and Shepherd's Bush, Camden, and Highbury and Islington. Further down Hillgrove Road you reach South Hampstead Station, a station on the Watford DC line offering links into London Euston, Wembley and Harrow. Bus routes wise, you have a great deal of choice within Swiss Cottage, as you have the option to use the 13, which offers a long distance trunk service from North Finchley through Finchley Central, Golders Green, St John's Wood, Baker Street and Marble Arch to Victoria, the 31 from White City to Camden serving Primrose Hill, Kilburn, Westbourne Park and Notting Hill, the 113 from Edgware to Marble Arch through Mill Hill, Hendon Central, Brent Cross, North Cricklewood, Fortune Green, St John's Wood and Baker Street. Amenities-wise, there are a plentiful supply of shops located along the Finchley Road. There's the O2 Centre by Finchley Road Station and there's a leisure centre located on the Swiss Cottage Gyratory. Well, that's enough I think about Swiss Cottage. Now, we'll move on into Hampstead. We've then moved on into Hampstead, known for its intellectual, artistic, political and literary associations. It's an area with a rich history dating back to the Mesolithic era. It's an area jam-packed with houses owned by famous people which include Agatha Christie, actress Helena Bonham Carter and comedian Ricky Gervais. Hampstead has more millionaires within its area's boundaries than any other area within the UK. It's a home to the ultra-rich and wealthy in London, which isn't too surprising when you consider the average house price in Hampstead went for 1.5 million in 2018. Hampstead started to see growth once the North London Railway, now the London Overground, opened a station in Hampstead Heath in the 1860s, and expanded even further when the Charing Cross Euston and Hampstead Railway was extended to Golders Green in 1907, which meant a station at Hampstead opened. Hampstead became part of London a lot earlier than the surrounding suburbs. joining the County of London in 1889 with a metropolitan borough of Hampstead formed in 1899. As well as being well renowned for its intellectual, artistic, political, and literary associations, the area is also home to a selection of museums for one to enjoy. These include Burgh House, constructed in 1704 during the reign of Queen Anne, which is used by the Hampstead Museum and for special events. Hampstead is notorious across London for being an affluent suburb, and the shopping areas situated on Heath Street and Hampstead High Street certainly reflect this. The streets are full with independent retailers, with a village-like atmosphere to it with its small passageways nestled between the rows of shops. It's a popular weekend destination, mostly due to nearby Hampstead Heath and the appeal of these middle-class shops that bring in these large swathes of people. Despite the popularity of the area isn't especially geared up transportation-wise when it comes to handling the number of visitors. Parking is, to say the least, problematic in Hampstead, where one would usually have to park slightly further out in order to reach Hampstead, especially on weekends. Congestion is also very common within Hampstead. It's really not that uncommon to see that large queues of traffic up the high street during rush hour or on weekends, which can hamper the reliability of the 46 and 268 which both use it. There's also a lack of links from the area around the station itself. The 268, whilst it provides useful links to the local community, mostly parallels links already offered by the Northern Line and the 46, although the 46 does offer slightly more in terms of links, where it links to places such as Bart's Hospital, King's Cross, Camden, Hampstead, Swiss Cottage, Warwick Avenue and Paddington. Whilst the 210 isn't especially far away from the 268 up at Whitestone Pond, I do feel some better links in the Highgate direction and further afield would be appreciated, which the 603 would help contribute towards. Hampstead, as mentioned earlier, does have a tube station, the deepest in London in fact, and offers fast and frequent Northern Line services towards central London and suburban North London. Slightly further up Heath Street you reach Jack Straw's Castle and Whitestone Pond, where passengers are able to interchange for the 210 towards Finsbury Park, Crouch Hill, Archway, Golders Green and Brent Cross Shopping Centre. Whitestone Pond is a pond sandwiched between Heath Street, Whitestone Walk and West Heath Road, which stands just before Jack Straw's Castle. A Grade 2 listed building and a former pub on North End Way, it was named after rebel leader Jack Straw, who helped lead the Peasants' Revolt in the 14th century, and was believed to have taken refuge on the site before being caught and exiled. Dickens was known to frequent the pub, which I honestly find so fascinating given he lived quite a fair distance from it in Bloomsbury. The pub unfortunately closed in 2002 and has had some of it converted into luxury apartments. Moving further down Hampstead Lane you reach Kenwood House and the Bishop's Avenue, two places that I've spoken more extensively about in my H3 video, released a few videos before this one, so if you would like to find out more detailed histories about them then I'll link it in the corner. What I will be speaking about, however, is the Spaniards Inn. The Spaniards Inn is a historic pub believed to have existed since 1585, being built on what was the Finchley boundary and forming an entrance to the Bishop of London's estate. The toll house built opposite the pub was believed to have been built around the early 18th century, and both the toll house and pub are now listed buildings. Those who travel along the Spaniards Road will likely be aware that it can cause a bit of a bottleneck, and there were some suggestions to remove it in 1966, although was strongly rejected due to the possibility it might encourage drivers to speed. I think it adds so much character to the area, and I would also dislike seeing it removed too. Now, that's Hampstead finished up. Let's move on to Highgate Village. We've now arrived at Highgate Village. Highgate has history dating back to the 14th century, when it was once a woodland which deer lived inside, some of which remains today as Highgate Wood. By the end of the century, Highgate became an established settlement with easy communication with London and Westminster, which was a particular attraction for those with business in the capital. Businessmen and rich folk were keen to buy land in Highgate, to build houses with eye-catching views. Highgate soon progressed into being a town in the 18th century, where amenities started to be built and more housing was constructed. When the Archway Road was constructed bypassing Highgate town, residents were fearful of what the area might have become, and so to pay tribute to its roots, residents started calling Highgate Village, which is what we all know it as today. Highgate is one of the most expensive areas to live in London, even wealthier than nearby Hampstead and further afield Kensington and Chelsea, and famous people who have chosen to call Highgate home include Noel Fielding and Liam Gallagher. There's also nearby Highgate Cemetery, where plenty of famous folk have been buried, including Karl Marx and George Michael. Slightly further down the road from Highgate Village, you've got Highgate Station, where people can change for the Northern Line for destinations such as Camden, the City, and central London. Moving back into the village, you're greeted with a picturesque little high street, with plenty of independent retailers up and down the high street to buy goods from. It's one of my favourite North London high streets, honestly. I just love the homely feel the high street has to it, and that many others across the capital just don't. There's so much love for the local shops, and just the entire experience is amazing. Highgate Village lies 130 metres above sea level, which is believable when you consider Highgate Hill is one of the steepest roads in inner London, with a teeth-grinding 7% gradient incline, and neighbouring Highgate West Hill is also a similar gradient. Drawing back to the theme of this video, Highgate is home to several private schools, which include Highgate School and Channing School, the former having existed within Highgate for centuries. As you progress slightly further down Highgate Hill, you run into Waterloo Park, a park that Lauderdale House has sat in since 1582. Transport links wise within the village, passengers are able to connect to the 143 towards Archway, East Finchley, Finchley Central, Hendon and Brent Cross, the 214 towards Kentish Town, Camden, King's Cross and Moorgate, and the 263 towards Highbury Barn, Highbury and Islington, Holloway Road, Archway, East Finchley, North Finchley, Whetstone, High Barnet and Barnet Hospital. The 603 would open up a few new lifty links within the area if it operated as a 7-day-a-week service, which include a direct link from Hampstead High Street to Highgate and a Highgate to Finchley Road and Swiss Cottage link. Now, on to East Finchley we progress. We've moved on into East Finchley. I've covered the history of the area more extensively within my H3 video, so if you'd like to see that then there will be a link to watch it in the corner. East Finchley is a residential area in North London with a variety of pubs, a great selection of shops and the Phoenix Cinema, well renowned among North Londoners. In East Finchley, passengers have the opportunity to change for the Northern Line, offering a fast and frequent service towards the City, Central London and other North London suburbs. In East Finchley you have the option to change for the 102 towards Edmonton Green, Silver Street, Palmer's Green, Bounds Green, Muswell Hill, Henley's Corner, Golders Green and Brent Cross. Now, let's move on into Muswell Hill then, shall we? We've now reached Muswell Hill where the 603 terminates. The area's history dates back to the 12th century, with the name believed to come from the words mossy well. In fact, up until the 1950s, the area was often pronounced Muswell Hill. Muswell Hill first saw development in 1895 when James Hall Renton, a wealthy stockbroker, passed away and his two large mansions, the Limes and Fortis House, transferred to Frederick Mason, who eventually sold them on to builder James Edmondson of Highbury. Edmondson helped lay out Queen's Avenue and the new Broadway with shops. He'd already had experience when it came to building high streets, as his father and him helped build out and develop Crouch End and Hornsey. The area has managed to retain much of its Edwardian feel to it since. Muswell Hill, like with Hampstead and Highgate, also has a selection of independent retailers to choose from, and is also a wonderful place to go for a stroll about on a weekend, with there being plenty of cafes and restaurants to choose from on the high street. As you head slightly down Muswell Hill, you reach the Parkland Walk, which up until the mid-20th century was part of the Muswell Hill Railway, a branch running between Highgate and Alexandra Palace with an intermediate station at Muswell Hill. The line was intended to be integrated into the Northern Heights project, but wasn't, and post-World War II the plan was cancelled and the railway line was abandoned from 1954, so since the railway was converted into a path for pedestrians and cyclists to enjoy. Alexandra Palace is slightly further down Muswell Hill, which is home to an ice rink, a Go Ape, a theatre, and a lovely park to sit down in when the weather's nice. The park is quite open, not too secluded or rural, although there are some bits of woodland on the fringes of the park. Transport-wise in Muswell Hill, you have Alexandra Palace not too far away on Great Northern, and Highgate down Muswell Hill Road for the Northern Line. Bus connections-wise from Muswell Hill, you are able to connect to the 144 towards Wood Green, North Middlesex Hospital and Edmonton Green, the 299 towards Bounds Green, Southgate, Oakwood and Cockfosters, and the W7 towards Crouch End and Finsbury Park. So you might be wondering, well, what makes the 603 an awkward route? Since you're including it in this series, there must be a reason why. I mentioned earlier on in the video that the 603 was designed to cater for school children attending schools within the Highgate and Hampstead areas, although the service has always been open for the public to use. For quite a while, the 603 did operate outside of just school days in school holidays, although never on weekends, so you could have considered the route to have been a regular Monday to Friday bus service during that period. The 603 since its inception has seen plenty of calls from local MPs to operate as a daily service, and TfL have investigated the idea on numerous occasions over the past 20 years. Whilst us North Londoners are slightly better off transport-wise compared to South London, it is still quite awkward to get between some places along the 603. Think Muswell Hill and Hampstead. You'd have to take the long and congested 102 all the way to Golders Green to then change onto the 268, going quite out of the way to complete the journey. Even more local journeys such as Hampstead to Highgate Village for those who aren't quite as mobile. The trek up Heath Street to the pond to catch a 210 is quite challenging given how steep the hill is. Transforming the 603 into a local route would be idyllic in a sense, as it would mean more direct connections across parts of North London that aren't geographically too far from one another, but questions do arise over whether a 7-day-a-week service could be viable. One of the issues identified earlier on with the introduction of the 603 was that parents would be taking their children to school, but due to the awkward nature of bus routes within Hampstead and Highgate, parents would often struggle to get back, prompting discussions on whether it would be more helpful to operate an all-day service. So, do I think an all-day service could be possible on the 603? Well, yes and no. The 603 provides links that don't already exist outside of those 4 journeys, and could in theory become quite popular. I doubt if a 603 were to be introduced it would be double-decker or have a particularly high frequency. I imagine a single-decker every 15 or 20 minute service would satisfy demand whilst being frequent enough to attract people towards using it. I'm not too sure on whether the 603 as a standalone service would work though, and so I'll pose 2 alternative solutions I would perhaps look at. The first suggestion I would offer is a diversion of the 234 from Highgate Wood to Hampstead Heath, taking North Hill, Highgate Village and Hampstead Lane, before progressing through Hampstead and taking the High Street down to the Royal Free Hospital. This would provide some nifty links from Muswell Hill towards Highgate Village itself, Kenwood House, Hampstead and Hampstead Heath for the Overground Station and the Royal Free Hospital. The benefits of this include reducing the overlap between the 234 and a standalone 603. This would mean just one route operating between Muswell Hill and Highgate Wood through East Finchley rather than having 2. Another benefit would be far easier access to the Royal Free Hospital for those being referred from further afield, as well as giving easier access to hospital staff who may live in the areas served. Although, what would be the downsides of such a suggestion? The 234 would become a long service, a useful one but a long one for sure, and given the nature of traffic within Hampstead, it could easily hamper reliability and make the service more prone to curtailment, which would affect those living on the Barnet to Muswell Hill section of the service. Another negative would be undoing certain changes from the restructuring of the 143, 234 and 263 in response to the withdrawal of the 271 in February of last year. To reroute the 234 to Hampstead Heath, you would need to remove one of the 143 or 263 from North Hill and Highgate High Street, and instead reroute one down the Archway Road to retain links that would have otherwise been broken through the removal of the 234. You also wouldn't have a direct service through to Swiss Cottage, although that shouldn't matter given there would be interchange for Swiss Cottage and the Finchley Road at Hampstead Station for the 46 and for the 268 and C11 at Pond Street. So what would my second suggestion be? Well, we identified with the 234 suggestion that the 234 would become a very long and traffic-prone route, so how about I suggest something slightly shorter instead? This is where I'll come on to the 268, the short Golders Green to Finchley Road O2 Centre route we've discussed a little bit about within this video, and how the route could be adjusted to connect some of the places. My alternative suggestion would be to divert the 268 at Whitestone Pond to Muswell Hill using Hampstead Lane, North Hill, Great North Road and Fortis Green. So what's the benefits of doing this? Well, the 268 is a lot shorter than the 234, and so it would be at a more manageable length to operate a Muswell Hill to Swiss Cottage link. You wouldn't run into anywhere near as many of the traffic hotspots that an extended 234 could potentially run into, and so it would make for a more reliable and enticing service to use. The service is less frequent than the 234, so it would be more suited to the demand that making the 603 line of route part of a daytime route would create, I should imagine. Every 12 minutes at present is slightly too hefty, I feel. If the 268 were to be diverted to Muswell Hill via via the route, then the 240 could always be extended to the Royal Free Hospital to maintain the link between Golders Green Station and the Royal Free, at a similar frequency to what the 268 currently operates at. By doing this, you'd also connect Hampstead Village and the Royal Free up to a wider selection of places, which, like with the 234 extension, would make it easier to access for patients referred and for hospital staff, and as an added bonus, the frequently overcrowded Golders Green bus station would lose 2 routes, making for an easier time fitting all the routes in. That all sounds very nice, so what's the negatives? Well, the 268 would be providing 2 routes between Muswell Hill and Highgate Wood, which might be slightly too generous and could leave the 234 more prone to seeing cuts to the service. You would also be adding another bus service between Highgate Village and Highgate Wood, which is already overbussed and could do with some modifications to ensure the corridor is more adjusted to suit demand. Another negative could be, whilst you would be freeing up stand space at Golders Green, where is the space in Muswell Hill most of the time? Even though the W7 has seen a slight frequency cut during the peak hours since the pandemic, I would argue there still isn't much in the way of stand space available for an extended 268, especially if the W7 is having a bad day and buses are bunching up with one another. One final point I'll leave you all with is, how would either of these suggestions impact the existence of the H3? The H3 is a well-loved bus route that I made my previous video on, and I'd be curious as to what the future would hold when a daytime variation of the 603 would be introduced. Anyway, that's it from me for this video. I hope you enjoyed the 3rd episode of my Awkward Routes series, and if you did, make sure to like, subscribe and share this video, as it massively helps you out when you do. What do you all think of the 603? Have you ever used it? What would you do to improve the service? Leave all that down in the comments below, which I'll make sure to read and respond to because I really enjoy doing so. Anyway, take care folks, see you in the next video.